Hello everybody, it's Luke Schulte, Field Agronomist for Beck Hybrids here in Ohio. Today is June 29th and we're evaluating corn for potential fungicide applications. So when we really want to focus our scouting is about now through about brown silk, or roughly R2. So as I look up at the tassel of this corn plant, as you can see, that tassel is completely exposed. We actually, on this plant, actually have some pollen being shed or some anthers exposed. But as I look down that row, not all the tassels are fully emerged. In fact, this plant right next door, or a couple plants down, actually doesn't have any of the tassel out. It's important that when we think about the timing of our fungicide application, that we focus on VT through about brown silk. That's when we need to protect that plant. Try to apply those fungicides then so that we can protect that plant during the bulk of that grain fill period, which is normally about 50 to 55 days. So where we want to focus our scouting efforts is the upper portion of that plant. So look at, here's the ear shoot. Focus on this ear leaf and about 1 to 2 leaves below that ear leaf and above. And so when I evaluate this leaf in particular, you can see we got some gray leaf spot forming, but overall that plant and this leaf specifically is pretty clean. When can you justify an application? If the lesions on each of those leaves add up to about the size of a quarter, a cumulative, then we can justify an application of fungicide specifically for disease alone. But focus on 1 to 2 leaves below this ear shoot and above. That's what we ultimately need to protect. While you're scouting, also think about what diseases are present. So in this field, the only disease I could find was actually some gray leaf spot creeping up. With all the hot, humid weather we had, it's no surprise. Gray leaf spot likes warmer temperatures with humidity. But think about the diseases, and gray leaf spot can move fairly quickly, but not as quickly as, say, northern corn leaf blight. Gray leaf spot will go from spore to spore in about 2 to 3 weeks, whereas northern corn leaf blight, that many times comes from our southerly storms, that'll take about 6 to 8 days to go from spore to spore. So it can really take over a crop, or the disease will be magnified much quicker than, say, gray leaf spot. That has a bearing as well if you think about the disease and disease progression. So now we think about what products we want to focus on, and our PFR proven products at VT is Headline Amp. So Headline Amp, is a combination product of strobilurin as well as a triazole, so preventative and curative. But we also have some other products that I'd like you to consider that have looked very promising at our PFR locations, and that's TrivaPro, which contains 3 classifications of a fungicide, curative as well as preventative action, as well as Delaro, which is actually a reformulation and different proportion of components that's in Stratego yield, but same components. When we think about the longevity and the time in which we're going to protect this plant, really we're looking at about a 3 to 4 week period. We're going to protect it about 3 to 4 weeks during that grain fill period with products like Headline Amp, maybe even Delaro. But when we think about a product with an SDHI, which is that new classification of fungicides like that's in TrivaPro, we'll protect that plant a little longer, perhaps another 7 to 10 days, totaling up around 4 to 5 weeks of protection. A lot of variables in there, how quick it gets in the plant, etc. So in a year like this year, what else would you think about would affect overall fungicide performance? And I'd encourage you to think about the stress of your crop. Some areas have been extremely stressed and some areas have not. But think about the stress your crop is under, and think about those products that have, say, a strobilurin fungicide like all 3 that I mentioned, Headline Amp, Delaro, TrivaPro, Stratego yield's another. They actually have a strobilurin or an SDHI in them, and that actually helps that plant from a plant health standpoint. Helps that plant to tolerate stress, reduce respiration, overall has the ability to allow that plant to encounter and endure stress significantly better. In cases where you've had a high stress load, whether it's extreme water that may have some stalk rots enter from the root system, or perhaps it's excessive heat, you may also think about, even without enough disease to justify that fungicide application, perhaps of spraying a fungicide as well in those crops to protect that overall investment and overall yield potential. Many times I get asked the question, well, should I include an insecticide or not? Remember what we're trying to do with that insecticide application. All we're ultimately trying to do is protect those silks, and we've got to protect those silks somewhere in that neighborhood of 4 to 5 days, because that's about how long it's going to take to pollinate that ear. And so many times I haven't found enough insect pressure to justify that insecticide application, but sometimes there are. In this situation, I would not recommend it, but you can see some Japanese beetle feeding, the evidence of it. But ultimately, we're just trying to protect those silks for the duration of that pollination window. So many times I don't recommend it, but sometimes it is validated. So those are some things to look for as you're evaluating your corn, and overall try and make that decision whether to or to not apply a fungicide application at tassel.